Hi, my name is Ashley Bugby, and this is my case study for EDL 951. To summarize the scenario, this is actually State City School District in the K through 8th building, which has about 420 students. The principal and admin of this building is Keith Sample, who also serves as the district administration. This is considered a rural school, and after 8th grade, the students are bused 25 miles into the city for high school. Another individual that is really important in this scenario is Mrs. Lynn. She is the part-time librarian and is in charge of the computer lab. It's also important to note that she has little to no training when it comes to this stuff. That is a very hard position to fill, especially with a limited budget like this school has. And so she is actually a parent that was willing to step in and fill that role, and again has very little training when it comes to this stuff, but has done a really good job of working with teachers and building relationships. Something else to note is that because of the low budgets in the school district, the Parent Teacher Association does a really good job of fundraising, and they have fundraised and can put together a computer lab that has 20 computers in it, and teachers can reserve this room. They work with Mrs. Lynn. The goal for the next 2 years is to buy more software to meet the student needs and provide more resources. And Mrs. Lynn has prioritized that, working with the staff and with the PTA as well. So Mrs. Lynn has actually talked to some teachers, and they have made this decision on their own to actually migrate some of the computers into classrooms and put software on those computers so that more students have access to it. So there's more like a computer or two per classroom. There is 2 teachers and 2 classrooms per grade level. So in their opinion, that would be a better way to serve students, is for them to readily have access in their classrooms to these devices and this software. So she went and got flash drives, has copied the software programs onto the flash drives, and has started installing them into the other computers. Miss Brandon, another veteran teacher, approached her and said, "Hey, this could be some copyright infringement. I think you need to be careful." Miss Lynn kind of told her, "I'm probably still going to do it." So when Miss Brandon told Mr. Samples, he approached her about the problem. She explained that she didn't understand what she was doing was wrong, and that she had told the PTA president about it, and they were proud of her for saving the district some money. So when you look into legal and ethical issues, first and foremost, this is a form of piracy. So reproducing or distributing, displaying, recreating, performing art, or intellectual property that is not yours is considered copyright infringement. You've possibly broken software licenses that are legally binding. These licenses define the legal number of eligible users or copies that are allowed made of a software program, and that is when a district or a school buys software from somewhere, it's almost always has a license of some sort with it, and those things are explained in there along with the terms of usage. So the terms of usage were probably violated as well. And the copyright, I think it's kind of a gray area in education, and some people think that because it's education, they can have fair use of stuff, but this does not fall into that. In a simple sentence, what is happening and the problem or issue that is occurring is that the school librarian is pirating copies of software and is attempting to install the software on classroom computers. Some facts about the case. I think it's always important when you're thinking about people involved, especially in education. First and foremost, you should think about students and how these things are affecting students. And I think in this case, it is important to know and keep in mind when you're dealing with some of the people in it that they are wanting the best and are trying to provide resources for students. Mr. Sample is the superintendent and the K-8 principal, Mrs. Lynn, the librarian, Mrs. Brandon, the veteran teacher, the Parent Teacher Association, and the software company as well. The place is at the K-8 building at the State City School District, within the computer labs and the classrooms. Also important to know that there's 2 teachers per grade. Some of the programs that we're talking about, there's a school technology initiative with 20 computers, there's PTA fundraising goals, and 4 software programs. And then we know that Mrs. Lynn has taken it upon herself, while talking to the PTA president and some of the teachers, to create a plan to change the goal of the 20 computers spread them out across classrooms, and copy and download software onto computers within those classrooms from the computer lab. Some of the missing information that I think I would like to know more about in this case is what kind of license agreement is there with the software companies? It would be important to note those kind of things. So reading through the terms of use, how many copies can you make of this? Because maybe she is within her right to copy it more than once. It is a general rule that with a license, you can make one copy of it and keep it as a backup copy. You are not supposed to use it unless your original copy does not work or is lost, though. I also want to know what kind of discussions were had about copying the software, because I know, and I have worked in a district, that the superintendent is also a principal, and in that position you are spread very thin, and so people sometimes take it upon themselves to make decisions that should also include admin. So I would definitely want to sit down with Mrs. Lynn, with the PTA president, and some of the teachers that had made this decision without maybe consulting me, to just have a genuine discussion of what were your thoughts on this? Have you looked into any of the different pieces of if we can do this properly? And it's also important to make sure with the district to look into any copyright policies or regulations that the district themselves have in place as well, because those are important to share and make known. When prioritizing the situation, I think when thinking about stakeholders, again, students should always be, everything is student-centered. It is important. We also want our teachers to feel supported and that they have the resources they need. And I definitely think that's a hard thing when you're talking about a rural school that has funding deficits. You need to think about Mrs. Lynn, because as much as this would be frustrating as an administrator to deal with her, it also is important to remember that she is not trained. So when she says, I had no idea that this was illegal or that this could be a problem, she genuinely means it. And when you look at her actions and the actions of the teachers, you know, they're really trying to do the best thing for students and get more resources in their hands more readily. So I would definitely handle her with kid gloves and try and educate her on the situation. You always have to think about the community members that are a part of the school, and it sounds like the school has a great community representation and support through their PTA. So when you're doing something and addressing this situation, it's also vital that you do it in a way that includes them and creates an understanding of why you did what you did, so that they know their support is still warranted and they understand what steps of action are next. And of course, the school district in general, so talking to the Board of Education, talking to other people within the district about policies and rules like that. So my options for action, option number 1 is to do nothing different. So to continue to allow Mrs. Lynn to put copies of the software into classroom computers. Option number 2, if you were really frustrated, you could do away with Miss Lynn's position and make all technology purchasing and usage decisions go through the superintendent/principal. And option 3, have Miss Lynn discontinue putting the software on the computers, preceded by having a meeting with Miss Lynn, the teachers, and the PTA to discuss the issue and develop a plan of action for the future. When looking and evaluating through these options, thinking about option 1, which is not to do anything, and to me would be to let Mrs. Lynn continue with the plans that her and the teachers and the PTA president made of dividing the software up and downloading it on computers in each classroom instead of having the computer lab and then having to purchase more software later to put on every computer. And I don't disagree with their thought process. It is getting educational resources into the hands of students more readily, and it's saving us some money as well. But I think that is, when you're a district leader, that is kind of where you have to become really good at communicating and working with people to help them understand, hey, even though that absolutely makes sense, and I really like the fact that you're trying to provide good resources for our students, it is also an issue when it comes to legality and the liability that it puts on the school district, and even Miss Lynn herself are the cons of that for sure. Option 2, if I was just to let go of Miss Lynn and just say, hey, I'm taking this over, all the purchasing is going to come through me, I'm going to run this. Obviously, it's going to stretch somebody thin. Now, it does address the problem in general. It stops what is happening. It makes the liability better because if the admin is a part of the purchasing process, that is important. But doing something this drastic is also really divisive. It creates a poor culture and climate. And in a school district like this, it's really easy as an admin to become spread really thin. So I don't think that it's necessarily a good idea to do away with the position and actually create more work for yourself. There's other opportunities that you can make this better. So for option 3, which is to work with the stakeholders, the pros, you get stakeholder involvement and hopefully create some understanding. And the cons, which is really hard to look at, but if we discuss with the software company and they said, no, you only have one license for one computer for the software, it means that there's less availability of educational resources for students. When I'm looking at what I would choose option 3. And again, it is kind of hard because it's hard to say, hey, you guys were really creative and you troubleshot this and we're trying to provide for our students, but no, you cannot do that. Because you also need to make sure that they understand the repercussions of this. Like in some of the resources for this module, the Houston School District had a $9.2 million settlement that they had to do because of this. I think a lot of people, myself included as a teacher, I can't say that I probably didn't break copyright law reading through a lot of this. There is a lot of availability in education to use the free use part of that, or the fair use part of that, but it's also that's kind of a dangerous game to play because, people are like, oh, they're not going to find us. We're a little district. Nobody's going to come here, but it's more and more available for you to be tracked when you're doing things. So I think it's really important for people to take notice of this and understand what a serious issue this is. So first, my plan of action would be have a stakeholder meeting. So bring everybody that had these discussions, obviously review the issue, create an understanding of why this is a problem. Look at the software license agreement, go through the terms of uses with them, and, try to make them understand, as much as it might be frustrating, that what they did is thoughtful, it is not appropriate. And also look at the district's copyright policy with them as well. I think it would be important to, with this group, is to meet with the software representative, because maybe they could give us more insight on, well, what are our options with this? What can we do this? Is there any way for us to make this available more widely for some of our students? Or could you cut us a deal on some stuff? Or maybe let us pilot it for the spring. Sometimes they will cut you a break on some of those things if you discuss things with them. I think it is important to develop a tiered plan for obtaining more licenses. And, just creating that understanding and a really good, solid, that it had discussed in the scenario that Mrs. Lynn did a good job of scheduling people in and out of the computer lab. And even though it may not be the optimal way to do things until we have more resources, it is the appropriate way to do things. And I would, across the board, no matter what, implement a training over copyright for staff. So at the beginning of every year, just remind them you need to understand intellectual property, especially with things like Teachers Pay Teachers, which is a really great resource now. But you need to be careful using other people's property, and it can be tracked a lot easier than it used to be. These are the resources that I used. Thank you.